A lonely rancher rescues two beaten native girls in 1874. But what their mother asked him the next day would change his life forever. Before we begin, make sure to like, subscribe, and tell me, where are you watching from?
Let's get started. Arizona Territory, 1874. The sun had just dipped low, casting the desert in a red haze, when Daniel Hayes rode his tired mare along the riverbank.
Life had taught him to expect little. His ranch gave him work, the land gave him silence, and loneliness was his only steady companion. Yet this evening, a sound broke the monotony. Weak cries, faint but urgent, carried on the wind. His brow furrowed, instincts sharpened. He spurred his horse forward, scanning the shadows, until he saw movement along the reeds. What he found would etch itself into his soul forever. Two figures lay slumped by the water's edge, barely moving. Dismounting, Daniel approached cautiously, his boots crunching against the gravel. As the shapes came into focus, his heart clenched. Two young native girls, no older than 12 or 13, bruised and beaten, their dresses torn and smeared with blood. Dust and tears streaked their faces, their eyes wide with fear. They recoiled at his shadow, flinching as though expecting another blow. Daniel lowered his hat, softening his presence. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice steady, carrying none of the harshness the girls had endured. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a water skin, kneeling slowly so he would not tower over them. Their breaths came ragged, trembling, but thirst was stronger than fear. The eldest extended a hesitant hand, and Daniel gently placed the skin into it. She drank carefully, then passed it to her sister. Watching them struggle to sip water ignited a fire in Daniel's chest, anger at whoever had reduced children to this broken state. He swallowed hard, fighting to keep his voice calm, though inside he seethed with fury he had not felt in years. The girls whispered something in their language, words Daniel could not understand, but their tone carried gratitude mixed with dread. He studied their torn clothes, the bruises marking their arms, the way they clung together like sparrows caught in a storm. Whoever had hurt them had meant to break them body and spirit. Daniel made a silent vow then. He would not let them be taken again. He lifted them carefully, one at a time, onto his wagon. His movements were gentle, deliberate, as though the smallest misstep might shatter what remained of their fragile trust. The ride back to his ranch was long and quiet, the sound of wagon wheels mingling with the cries of coyotes in the distance. The girls sat wrapped in an old blanket, their eyes darting nervously at every sound, shoulders stiff with tension. Daniel kept glancing back, offering a faint smile whenever their gaze met his. He wanted them to know they were safe now, though words felt hollow compared to the violence they had endured. As the cabin finally came into view, relief swept through him like a tide. Shelter, warmth, safety. He could at least give them that. Inside, the cabin was simple, built with his own hands years ago when he still believed in family and dreams. He lit the lantern, casting a soft glow over the wooden walls. The girls stepped inside hesitantly, clutching the blanket tighter. Daniel guided them toward his bed, layering it with furs for comfort. He fetched clean water, carefully washing the dust and blood from their faces. The younger whimpered when he touched a bruised shoulder, and Daniel paused, whispering reassurance. He was clumsy, unused to tending wounds, but his care was sincere, his hands steady, though his heart ached. He cooked a small pot of beans and cornbread, the only food he had left for the week. As the scent filled the cabin, the girls' wary expressions softened. Hunger overcame fear, and they ate quietly, eyes lowering in respect. Daniel sat across from them, watching in silence, feeling something stir deep inside him. His cabin had been empty for so long that he had forgotten the sound of company. Now with each bite they took, with each cautious glance of trust, his loneliness cracked like old timber in a storm. The silence that followed was no longer empty, it was alive. When the meal was done, Daniel fetched another blanket and tucked it around the girls, their eyes heavy with exhaustion. He pulled a chair beside the fire, rifle resting across his knees. He knew the men who had done this were still out there, somewhere, and he would not let them near again. The flames flickered, casting shadows across the room as the girls drifted into uneasy sleep. Daniel watched over them, his thoughts dark and restless. For years his life had been aimless, but now he felt a clear purpose burning stronger than any fire: protection. Outside, the desert night was cold, stars glittering above like watchful eyes. Coyotes howled in the distance, their cries echoing across the land. Daniel sat by the fire until dawn, every creak of the cabin, every snap of a branch outside sharpening his senses. He thought of the girls' frightened faces, their bruises, their whispered words he could not understand. A heavy anger smoldered inside him, but alongside it, something else grew: responsibility. He had stumbled upon them by chance, yet he knew in his bones that this was no accident. Fate had placed them in his path. As the first light of morning spilled through the window, Daniel rose quietly, checking the land outside. The air was still, but unease lingered. He turned back to the cabin, where the girls stirred beneath the blankets, their eyes opening slowly. They looked at him not with the terror of the night before, but with cautious trust. The older one managed a faint smile, broken but real. Daniel's chest tightened, his throat thick. For years he had lived only for himself, hardened by solitude and silence. But now, in their fragile presence, he felt something he thought had long died: hope. By morning, the cabin was filled with the faint smell of wood smoke and cornbread, the fire still burning low in the hearth. The girls stirred beneath the blankets, blinking against the sunlight, filtering through the cracks in the wooden walls. They sat up slowly, their hair tangled, faces pale but calmer than the night before. Daniel crouched beside them, speaking softly, letting them know breakfast was ready. It was then, in broken English, that they whispered their names: Sunny and Mika. Their voices were fragile, but the sound of identity broke the silence, anchoring them back into life. Daniel felt his chest tighten as they revealed their truth in pieces, words tumbling out haltingly, broken but urgent. They had been taken from their people by men who treated them with cruelty, men who saw them as nothing more than property. Sani clutched her sister's hand as tears rolled down her bruised cheeks, while Mika buried her face in the blanket. Daniel listened without interruption, jaw tight, fury simmering under his calm exterior. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the chair, the fire in his heart threatening to consume him. He wanted justice, but more than that, protection. He promised them in a low, steady voice that no harm would ever reach them again, not while he drew breath. The girls studied him carefully, as though weighing whether such a promise could be trusted. Slowly, Sunny gave a faint nod, squeezing Mika's hand. That single gesture carried more weight than any words could. Daniel knew trust was not given lightly, especially after such cruelty. He vowed to earn it every day he could. The ranch, once built for solitude, now felt like a sanctuary, alive with new meaning, though danger still lingered just beyond its borders. The following afternoon, as Daniel repaired a fence near his cabin, the thunder of hooves reached his ears. He froze, gripping the post, his instincts sharp. Dust rose from the ridge, and soon a band of Apache riders appeared, their faces stern, eyes like sharpened steel. Daniel straightened, hands ready but calm, as the riders approached his land. At their head rode a tall woman, adorned with beads and eagle feathers, her presence commanding, her gaze fierce. The girls cried out, voices breaking with joy, as they rushed from the cabin to run toward her, their small bodies trembling with relief. The woman dismounted swiftly, her long braids swaying as she dropped to her knees, pulling her daughters into her arms. Tears streamed down her face, though her expression remained strong. She murmured to them in her tongue, holding them as though she would never let go again. Daniel stood back, his heart heavy yet relieved. He expected suspicion, perhaps anger, maybe even violence from the riders surrounding him. His hand hovered near his holster, prepared if things turned against him. But instead, the woman rose slowly, her daughters clinging to her dress, and turned her sharp gaze directly toward him. Her eyes measured him, scanning every detail, his weathered face, his worn clothes, his rifle resting against the fence. Daniel held her gaze without flinching, ready to accept whatever judgment she would give. Then, to his surprise, her expression softened. She stepped closer, her English broken but steady. "You saved my daughters. You gave them water, food, shelter. You risked your life when others would walk away." Daniel swallowed hard, unused to praise. He shifted uneasily, muttering that anyone would have done the same. But she shook her head firmly. "No, many would not. That makes you different. That makes you strong." The words hung heavy in the air, weightier than any bullet Daniel had ever taken. He felt his defenses falter under the quiet strength of her voice. The riders behind her remained silent, their eyes watchful but not hostile. Then the woman spoke again, her tone carrying both gratitude and sorrow. "They need more than a mother's love now. They need protection, guidance, a man to teach them how to live strong in a world that has already tried to break them. Be their protector. Be their father. Be their strength." Her words pierced him deeper than any wound could. Daniel's throat tightened, his chest heavy with conflicting emotions. He had lived alone for years, building fences, tending cattle, eating in silence. He had long accepted solitude as his only companion. Yet here was a woman asking him to step into a role he had never imagined. A father, a shield, a man to carry not just his burdens, but theirs as well. He looked at Sani and Mika, their tear-streaked faces pressed against their mother's dress, their eyes glancing back at him with fragile hope. In that moment, Daniel realized his life had already changed. The choice was no choice at all. He stepped forward, his boots crunching against the earth, and placed a hand over his chest. His voice, low but steady, carried across the silence. "I'll protect them. For as long as I draw breath, I'll be their strength." The woman's eyes glistened, her jaw trembling though her composure remained. She nodded slowly, as if sealing a sacred bond. The riders behind her lowered their weapons, their expressions shifting from suspicion to quiet approval. The girls released their mother, running to Daniel with small arms wrapping around his waist. His heart swelled, breaking and healing all at once. The mother lingered for a moment longer, her gaze still fixed on him. "Then you are no longer alone, Daniel Hayes," she said softly, almost like a blessing. With that, she mounted her horse, her riders following. Dust rose as they disappeared over the horizon, leaving Daniel with two trembling but smiling girls clinging to his side. He looked down at them, his calloused hands resting gently on their shoulders. His cabin no longer looked empty. His land no longer felt barren. For the first time in years, Daniel did not feel like a man waiting for life to pass him by. That night, as the fire flickered in the cabin and the girls curled up in blankets, Daniel sat beside them, listening to their breathing steady in sleep. His rifle leaned against the wall, but for once he did not feel the weight of constant vigilance pressing down. Instead, he felt the weight of something greater, responsibility, belonging, love. He realized the land had given him cattle, solitude, and scars. But fate had given him something far more precious, a family. The rancher who had once lived only for himself now lived for two small voices whispering his name in the dark.